This is Trevor. Welcome to the rooftop. I'm going to be taking you through a brew day, fermentation, and tasting of an English style IPA that I brewed about a month ago. Unfortunately, I lost the first half of the brew day footage, and so you're going to be jumping in where I'm talking about the hop schedule for this beer. So let me back up and kind of catch up on what you've missed. So the motivation for this beer was I had purchased a pound of East Kent Goldings about a year and a half ago to do some stouts and some porters, and I think I did like 2 and just had a bunch of those hops left. And so what better way to use up a bunch of hops than an IPA? So that was the goal for this brew day and for this beer. So I, as usual, spent some time looking around the internet, doing some research, trying to find a couple different recipes for an English style IPA that I could use for my brew day. I found one on craftbeerandbrewing.com that I really liked a lot, and so that's the basis for both the grain bill and the hop schedule for this beer. So I'm going to go over the grain bill in just a second. I'm going to go over the water additions in just a second, but I wanted to take just a minute and talk about the differences between an IPA that you might run into in the States versus an English style IPA and what the two are really going for and what the differences are. So with an English style IPA, let's start with the grain bill. So Maris Otter is typically used as the base malt, and I find that Maris Otter has a little bit more of a biscuity type flavor to it than, say, just a pale malt that you would use in an American IPA. You're also typically going to see more crystal malt in an English style IPA than you will in an American style IPA, where you really are wanting the malts to just be the backdrop for the hops for the American style IPA. For the English style IPA, you really do want those crystal malts to actually present themselves in the finished beer and actually be part of both the aroma and the flavors that you're getting out of that beer. So that's the malt. Let's talk about the hops a second. English style or English grown hops are, things like Fuggles, East Kent Goldings. They're typically more earthy, floral, spicy, and that's what you're going to be getting out of those. Usually pretty low alpha acid. And then for the yeast, you're going to be seeing something. English style yeast is going to present a little bit more fruitiness to the beer in the final beer, whereas an American style like a Safel 05 or a California WP 01 is going to be a very clean yeast. You don't want any yeast presenting itself in that finished beer. And then finally, with the hops of the American beer, you're really looking for those American hops are really big citrusy flavors, right? And so that's a very different type of hop aroma and flavor that you're getting from those American hops versus that spicy floral hop that you're getting from the English style. So next, let's talk about the grain bill for the beer. So the grain bill that I did for this beer was 10 pounds of Maris Otter. And I also did, my first time around using English crystal, so I did half a pound of English medium crystal, I did half a pound of English dark crystal, and then I did half a pound of English extra dark crystal, and you'll get my thoughts on that at the end of the video during the tasting. Target IBU for this was 45. The mash temp that we did was 151 for the beer, and the water additions that I used Brew and water, and I didn't use a calculator to calculate the grains on this one, so I really wasn't thinking about the color this beer was going to come out. I was just thinking IPA, typically use a yellow profile, a yellow balanced, or a yellow dry. So ended up using yellow dry. Should have used brown, because boy is this beer brown. It is a dark brown beer, nowhere near yellow, but that's fine. I don't really think it mattered all that much. But the additions that I did were 2.5 milliliters of lactic acid, 3.6 grams of gypsum, and then 1.7 grams of calcium chloride. Alright, so while we're waiting on the boil to get here, I thought I'd go over the hop additions real quick. So at 60 minutes, we're going to be doing 2 ounces of East Kent Golding. I know that seems like a lot, but the alpha acid for East King Goldings is very low, 5.8%. So in order to get to the IBU target that I'm looking for, around 45 IBUs, it's going to take quite a bit of East King Golding at the beginning to do that. You could certainly use some kind of bittering hop instead of this to get to those same alpha acids. And probably not impart a lot of different flavors, but I wanted to be true to the goal of using the East King Goldings through this whole beer. And then at 10 minutes, we're going to be doing a 1 ounce addition of East King Golding. And then at 0 minutes and for about 20 to 30 minute whirlpool, we're going to be doing another ounce of East King Golding. Now, my plan is also to do some dry hopping with this, so I'm going to do like 2 to 3 days in the primary fermenter, another ounce of East King Golding. And then I'm going to let it finish out, and then I'm going to keg it, and then I'm going to taste it and see what I think about what I'm getting from an aroma standpoint at that point. And I may or may not choose to do another ounce or 2 ounces dry hopping in the keg as a second dry hop addition. So we'll just have to wait and see how it turns out before we make that decision. One of the other things I'm going to do while I'm waiting on the wort to boil is I'm filling up that bin, this bin with rainwater from that rain barrel there. And what I'm going to do is when the boil's finished and it's time to cool the beer, I'm going to use this sub pump here to pump the water through the plate chiller and use that to cool down the wort without wasting water from the faucet. That's something I've been doing for a while now, and it works really well, and it's a great way to keep from having to waste a bunch of water. So the thing to remember, of course, is that none of that water is touching the wort or the beer. It's just pumping through and catching the heat and then heading back out. Alright, so we just hit the boil. It's amazing the different aroma characters I'm already getting out of this. A lot of caramel and toffee, and almost even a coffee. It's I think this is going to make for a really interesting final product. So I'm going to turn off the floor burner, and I'm just going to let the heat stick do the work. So give this a few minutes, and then we will do our hop edition, our 60-minute edition. Alright, got the burner turned off, got the heat stick going, it's boiling really nicely. We go ahead and do our 60-minute edition and start the clock. Floral, earthy smell. It's wonderful. Alright, so while I'm waiting for the next hop edition, I'll go ahead and sanitize my fermenter here. So I've just got a bucket of sanitizer. I'm going to run this off in here. There. So that'll at least be done, and we're ready to move it on over. Okay, Celestine, you ready for the 10-minute edition?
Yeah.
Okay, put it right in there. Great job. All right, so we're coming up on the end of the boil here. I'm running the hot wort through the plate chiller and the pump just to sanitize everything, and getting ready to do the whirlpool addition. One thing that you didn't see was I actually had a surge protector go out on me, and so the heat stick quit working, so I had to revert back to the propane to finish everything out. But we're getting ready to come up on the end here and do the whirlpool addition and cool things off. So we finished off at about just under 6 gallons. So I'm probably going to lose a little bit in the equipment, and then I know I'm going to lose about a half gallon in the fermenter, so that should give us just barely under 5 gallons in the keg, so that's perfect. Alright, so I added the whirlpool addition, and we are whirlpooling. So I'm going to let that go for 20 to 30 minutes and then cool things off. Alright, so we've been whirlpooling now for about 25 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and start cooling things off. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn on the water to let it start circulating through the plate chiller. And I'm going to let the whirlpool keep going, and I'm just going to monitor here and hear how low we're getting the temperature. And when we start getting close to that, 70 degrees, then I'm going to unhook the whirlpool and just start running it right into the fermenter. So here we go. And on the throttle here, and we can already see we're getting down to 100. I'm just moving the handle there to throttle this down. Getting down. Overall, looking at about 150. So once this stabilizes around 70, I'm going to start moving that over into the fermenter. Alright, so right about 70. They're running in there. Up. And what I'll do is once we get this all in there, I'll aerate it. I'll just shake it for about a minute, and then we'll get the yeast in there. Alright, so I got everything in the fermenter. I aerated it by shaking it for about a minute vigorously. Sprinkled the dry yeast, the Saffold US04 English yeast in there, and then I set the fermentation chamber to 64 degrees. So we'll let that go for 2 to 3 days. I'll pull it out and let that free rise from there. I'll probably dry hop it at the same time. Hopefully in 6 to 7, 8 days it'll be finished, and we'll keg it at that point. Alright, so let's just check in on where we are with the fermentation. So I left the fermenter in the fermentation chamber at 64 degrees for 3 days. I took it out to free rise after that for additional 2 days. Normally I would have dry hopped at that time, but a weird thing happened. I didn't see any airlock activity while I was in the fermentation chamber or the 2 days after I pulled it out. Sometimes that can happen with dry yeast where it's just not viable any longer, it doesn't get rehydrated enough. A lot of things can happen there. In this case though, I think what happened was we had maybe a small leak where the CO2 was getting out somewhere else, either underneath the seal here or around the seal, not really sure. But I know that it did ferment because I drew out a sample and put it in the hydrometer. And we're looking at somewhere around like 1014, something like that, 1010. So it may still have some fermenting left to go. But either way, I want to go ahead and dry hop that beer now. So that's what I'm going to do. So we've got 1 ounce of East Kent Goldings that I've measured out in my strainer here. And I'm just going to pop this lid open. Pop that in. I'll probably let that go for another couple of days, maybe even a week, not really sure at this point, but I'll monitor it, check it in a few days, and then if we start to see a consistent reading on the hydrometer, then I'll go ahead and keg that beer, and then I'll probably taste it at that time uncarbonated and make a decision on whether I want to actually dry hop in the keg as I keg the beer. So we'll wait and see. Alright, so I thought we'd finish this video off by doing a tasting of this English IPA. So from a just visual, I like the brown color that it is. It's not clear, obviously I'm not clarifying this. I didn't use any Irish moss or anything else to find this, so I'm okay with that. But the color is nice. It was kind of fun to use the different English crystal malts to brew this beer, and I've kind of been sipping on this beer off and on throughout the week. When I first started sipping on it, it had a real harsh, how those heavy, darker crystals can give that. And so it's kind of concerned, but as it's mellowed out and conditioned a bit in the keg, it's actually starting to be quite enjoyable. So I haven't really thought through exactly what I'm experiencing necessarily, other than like just tasting the malts as I sipped on a few samples. So let's do a quick tasting of it now. So you know, anytime you hear IPA, especially when you're drinking an American IPA, you're expecting this huge burst of hop, citrus hops. Obviously not getting that here with the East Kent Goldings, but I am definitely getting a pleasant, kind of spicy, earthy. I'm also smelling a lot of the hops, or not the hops, rather the malt, kind of a toffee, almost like a dark toffee mixed with earth kind of thing. So I think maybe even some lemon there too, or something like a mild citrusy kind of smell. So right at the beginning I get a nice mellow bitterness, and then as it dissipates, it starts to get that caramel toffee, like a dark toffee, almost like a toffee candy, and but then there's that lingering bitterness throughout, and then there's a little bit of that lemon that kind of floating around in there as well. Yeah, it's really nice. I can't tell whether that bitterness is coming completely from the hops, or some of that may be coming from all the crystal malt that's in there. I think if I did, you know, it depends on how this beer ends up conditioning throughout its life here in my kegerator. But I'm thinking next time I'll leave out the extra dark malt and just see what ends up happening with this beer like that. I would be okay if it was a little bit lighter. I like the color, but I would be okay with it a little bit lighter. And again, I feel like there's a lot going on with those crystals, so maybe crystal malt. So maybe just taking one out, that darkest one, and just seeing what would happen, how it would turn out would be interesting. But I do like that East Kent Golding, and I do like the malt bill overall. I think this is going to be a really, really nice beer as it continues to condition. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. As always, hit the like button, subscribe, and stick around for the next video. Cheers.